a recent cold and snowy day, I paid a visit to Lanark Cemetery. Lanark is a small town in the central belt of Scotland and was historically the county town of Lanarkshire. It was made a royal borough in 1140, and the oldest section of the cemetery dates to close to this period, with existence of the now ruined St Kentigern's Church dating back to 1150. The church was once attended by the Scottish hero William Wallace, and some sources state that he was married here. The next oldest section, named St Nicholas, is centred around a memorial erected in memory of all the Lanark-associated Covenanters. It lists those who were martyred, those who were tortured and banished, and also those who were fined. Military graves and memorials can be found throughout the entire cemetery, with some of the earliest we found on a visit dating from the early to mid-19th century. One notable example we found was this memorial to Major General Thomas Rennie Stevenson. He was born in 1841 and his military career began when he was 20 years old. He rose to command the Royal Irish Fusiliers and served in the Egyptian campaign of 1882, being present at the Battle of Tel el-Kebir and being mentioned in dispatches. In later life he was Deputy Lieutenant of the County of Lanark, but he also made a name for himself as a talented woodcarver and sculptor. Much of the interior of his home, Sunnyside, in nearby Kirkfield Bank, was made up of his carvings, and it is said that the almost complete loss of these in a fire in 1923 contributed to his death 10 days later, as he never recovered from the loss of so much of his work. Surviving elements of his carving can now be seen in the Christchurch Episcopal Church in Hope Street in Lanark. Walking among the rows, I came across this First World War memorial, dedicated to the members of a local tent of the Independent Order of Rechabites, a friendly society and fraternal organisation founded as part of the temperance movement. This is one of several Rechabites memorials dotted throughout the country, with other examples located on the Isle of Wight and in Chesterfield in Derbyshire. We know a little about some of the names listed on this memorial, so we'll take some time to cover this in more detail in a future video. Most cemeteries in Britain have their fair share of graves dating from the two world wars, and Lanark Cemetery is no exception. These can be found scattered throughout almost every section, even the oldest, where the grave of Alan Somerville, who although born locally served with the Canadian Forces, can be found lying among burials dating to the 1700s and earlier. The sheer number of names of those buried in France, Belgium and elsewhere is hard to comprehend at times. The two graves pictured here between them commemorated 4 men who lost their lives and are buried in France. In some sections, almost every grave in a row remembers at least one family member lost. We unfortunately don't have time to look at the stories of all the names listed on stones within the cemetery, but we thought we'd look at just a few. One unusual memorial is to that of Sergeant James Cunningham. Rather unusually, he served with the United States Army. He was born in Lanark in 1888, but when he enlisted in the army he was living in Detroit, Michigan. He served in the 31st Division, but did not see action in France as he died from pneumonia on board his transport ship bound for France on the 16th September 1918. He is now buried in the Saint Mihiel American Cemetery in France, as well as being remembered here by his family in his hometown. William Anthony Morgan is one of the men who is actually buried within the cemetery. He was actually born in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1863. William was the organising secretary of the National Service League, and when war broke out he actually volunteered as an orderly with the Scottish Red Cross. He served on the Western Front and was commissioned and commanded a mobile unit of the Scottish Red Cross Society, but after being invalided home after the Second Battle of Ypres in April 1915, he was gazetted as a captain in the Lanarkshire Yeomanry. He was commanding officer at their depot and also worked in the records office in Hamilton until he contracted double pneumonia and died in November 1917 in Glasgow. One name from the Second World War is that of Norman Vere Maxwell Adams. Norman was a Lanark boy, son of a local doctor, and had completed 2 years as a medical student at Edinburgh University when the war broke out. He was commissioned to the Lanarkshire Yeomanry, but when the Army Air Corps was formed he became a glider pilot. He took part in the landings at Sicily where he was wounded, but recovered in time to take part in the operations at Arnhem. He was due to be part of the first lift, but instead took off on the second lift on the 18th September 1944. His glider never made it to Holland as it crashed in the North Sea en route. Although Norman was killed in the crash landing, all the other occupants of the glider were saved. We can only really scratch the surface of the stories which can be found here, so if you're in the area, we recommend taking some time to come see Lanark Cemetery for yourself. With the nearby Clyde Valley and the new Lanark World Heritage Site, there's much to see in Lanark. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like, leave a comment below, and please remember to subscribe to our channel.